I'm Melina, and until my 30th birthday, the most exciting part of my life was when the accounting firm I worked for decided to switch from PCs to Macs. Yeah, not exactly headline stuff, but that was my world. Quiet, predictable, and safe. So when a close friend invited me to her birthday party, I figured it'd be just another night of small talk and awkward corners. Standing in the corner of a cramped living room, clutching a soda, feeling self-conscious in my too tight dress, I wasn't expecting much. The music was loud, way too loud for any kind of real conversation, but apparently just right for him. Mark was a head taller than most people in the room, which probably helped him spot me immediately. He sauntered over with a confidence that made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, you're Melina, right?" His voice was clear even over the thumping bass. Yeah, and you are?" I sipped my drink, trying to seem calmer than I felt. "I'm Mark. I've seen you around. Mind if I join you?" Without waiting for an answer, he stood beside me. "And not at all," I stammered, my voice nearly drowned out by the latest pop hit blasting through the speakers. "So, Melina, what brings you here tonight?" He leaned in, his tone casual, but his eyes intense. "Just here to celebrate Sarah's birthday, you know, her longtime friend from college. She keeps dragging me to these things." I shrugged, feeling a little shy. "Can't say no, can you?" Mark laughed. We clicked immediately. We talked and laughed like we'd known each other for years. I told him I worked with Sarah. She was kind of impossible to say no to.
Mark nodded knowingly.
"Numbers are my game," I joked, though I usually found nothing funny about spreadsheets. "Sounds thrilling," he grinned. I wasn't sure if he was teasing me or genuinely interested. "Oh, absolutely. It's all wild parties and high stakes in the accounting world," I said sarcastically. We both laughed. Then I felt it, the ease of talking to someone who was genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was new, exciting, and a little scary. "Want to grab some air?" Mark suggested, tilting his head toward the backyard. I nodded, grateful for the escape from the noise. Outside, the cool air was a welcome relief. I asked, trying to sound smoother than I felt. "So, what's a guy like you doing in a place like this?" "Just looking for a good time, I guess. Maybe someone cool to hang out with," he said, smiling with those crinkly eyes that made my heart flutter. We talked about everything and nothing, movies, books, life's little frustrations. He told me he was into graphic design but stuck in a corporate gig he didn't love. As the night wound down, Mark pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number? I'd really like to see you again." I hesitated. I wasn't used to this kind of attention, but something about him felt right. "Sure," I said, punching my number in. He smiled, his whole face lighting up. "Great. I'll call you. We should go out, just the two of us." I managed a smile, my stomach doing flips. Watching him walk away, I still couldn't believe this was my life now. The days after Mark's call felt like a blur. Before I knew it, I was getting ready for our first date. My nerves were all over the place. It wasn't like I had much experience in this department. I chose a simple blue dress. Nothing fancy, but I hoped it would do the trick. Mark picked me up at 7 sharp. His car was a clean, well-kept sedan, nothing flashy, but it suited him perfectly. As I got in, he flashed me a smile that could knock you sideways. And just like that, maybe turning 30 wasn't so bad after all. Maybe it was the start of something truly great. "You look great," Mark said, flashing that smile again. "Thanks," I mumbled, my face probably as red as a tomato. "You look nice too," he added warmly. Dinner was at a cozy little Italian place Mark knew. The aroma of fresh herbs and simmering sauce filled the air, but my stomach was doing somersaults. We ordered pasta. Mark picked something fancy, with a sauce I couldn't even pronounce, while I stuck to plain old marinara. "So, Melina," Mark said, twirling spaghetti expertly onto his fork, "tell me something about you that no one else knows." I chuckled nervously, pushing my food around my plate more than eating it. "Well, I'm pretty boring, but I guess not everyone knows I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 1 minute." He raised his eyebrows, genuinely impressed. "Really? That's pretty cool. You'll have to show me sometime." "Sure," I said, starting to relax a little. "What about you? Any hidden talents? I make a mean breakfast burrito, he boasted with a grin. Best you'll ever have. I'll take your word for it. Maybe you can prove it sometime, I teased. The conversation flowed effortlessly. For the first time in a long while, I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Mark would come over after work, or I'd meet him for lunch near his office. He introduced me to his favorite hidden spots around town, little nooks and cozy cafes I'd never noticed before. It was like seeing the city for the first time. Things took a serious turn when Mark invited me to meet his parents, Jack and Mary. They lived in a small but cozy house, filled with family photos and charming knickknacks. Mary hugged me as soon as we walked in. "Oh, we've heard so much about you, dear," she said, squeezing my shoulders warmly. "Mark, she's lovely," Mary told him. "Thanks, Mom," Mark replied, clearly pleased. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation was nonstop. "So, Melina, Mark tells us you're an accountant. That must be interesting," Jack said, passing me the potatoes. "It has its moments," I replied with a smile. "Mostly just numbers, but I like the order of it." "And how's your family?" Mary asked, genuinely interested. "They're good, thanks. My dad's a businessman, always busy, but he's been really supportive of me." It was all happening fast, but it felt right. Like everything in my life had been leading up to this moment, Mark feeling like someone who finally saw me for who I really was, not just some plain Jane accountant. One evening, a few months into our whirlwind romance, we were walking along the riverbank. The city lights shimmered on the water's surface, casting a glow that felt straight out of a postcard. "Melina," Mark started, stopping and turning to face me. "Yeah," I asked, heart already racing. "I don't want to wait any longer. I know this is fast, but will you marry me?" Just like that, my world changed. No hesitation. No doubt. Just a simple, joyful, "Yes, Mark. I'll marry you." The whirlwind didn't stop there. Soon after, I introduced Mark to my father. He took to Mark immediately, appreciating his straightforward manner and obvious affection for me. "He's a good man, Melina," Dad said, giving his approval, and that meant the world to me. We got married in a modest ceremony, nothing extravagant, but perfect for us. I even found myself loving the way I looked in my wedding dress, something I'd never imagined before. Smiling wide, I posted photos on social media, sharing my joy with friends and family. But after the wedding, life didn't slow down. It picked up pace. Mark and I barely had time to savor our newlywed bliss before he suggested something big. "Hey, Melina," Mark said one evening, unpacking another box of wedding gifts in our cramped apartment. "I've been thinking, how about we move in with my folks?" I paused, a coffee mug in hand. "Live with your parents?" He nodded, looking serious.
Yeah.
"They're not getting any younger, and I'd feel better if we were around to help out. Plus, it would save us some money on rent." It made sense, I guess. But moving in with the in-laws? That was sitcom territory. "Are you sure they'd want us there all the time?" I asked. "Absolutely," Mark assured me. "Mom's been hinting about it ever since we got engaged. Come on, it'll be good." 2 weeks later, there we were, pulling up to his parents' house, our lives packed into a bunch of boxes. Mary was waving from the porch before we even got out of the car. "Oh, Melina, we're so thrilled to have you both here," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that was a bit too tight. Jack, Mark's dad, clapped Mark on the back. "Welcome home, son, and you too, Melina." The house was cozy, stuffed with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum of the 1970s. I tried to keep a smile on my face, but I was already missing our little apartment. Mark sensed my hesitation as we carried boxes inside. "It's going to be great, you'll see," he whispered, his voice warm but hopeful. The first few days were an adjustment. Mary was constantly hovering, popping into our room to ask if we needed anything. "Just making sure you're comfortable," she'd chirp cheerfully. I tried not to cringe at the invasion of privacy. One evening, we all sat down for dinner. Mark, me, Jack, and Mary. The conversation was painfully mundane until Mark dropped a bombshell. "So, the house needs some major repairs," he announced casually between bites of meatloaf. I choked on my mashed potatoes. Repairs. Yeah, the roof's a mess and the plumbing's from the dark ages, he explained. Jack nodded solemnly. We were thinking, Mark continued, avoiding my gaze, maybe we could all chip in for the costs. I glanced at Mary, who suddenly became very interested in her plate. Well, I just got this pay cut at work, Mark muttered, voice low. So, I'm a bit strapped at the moment. There it was, a knot formed in my stomach. I forced a smile. I'll see what I can do. I managed, though inside I wanted to scream. Mary perked up, tears welling in her eyes. Oh, Melina, that would be so helpful. You're such an angel. The next few weeks were a blur of contractors and repairs. I wrote checks and smiled through gritted teeth as Mary gushed about how wonderful the house was looking. Jack slapped me on the back one day. You're really part of the family now, Melina. Part of the family, I repeated bitterly. Sure. The part that pays for everything. One particularly grueling day, after yet another round of expensive decisions, I collapsed onto our bed, utterly exhausted. Mark came in and sat beside me. Thanks for handling all this, Melina, he said, his voice almost sincere. It's fine, I lied, staring at the ceiling. I just didn't realize how much it would be. He squeezed my hand gently. It'll all be worth it. This is for our future, right? Our future, I echoed, not quite sure whose future we were building anymore. As I lay there listening to Mark's steady breathing, I couldn't help but wonder if moving in had been the right decision. But there was no going back now. I was in this deep, and I had to see it through, whatever the cost. After the renovations, the house looked amazing, like something out of a magazine. Despite the financial strain, I felt a small flicker of pride looking around. We decided to throw a small dinner party to celebrate, just the four of us. We were in the middle of dinner, laughing and sharing stories, when Mary suddenly went quiet. The room felt heavy all at once. She looked at Jack, then at us, her eyes tearing up. We need to tell you both something important, she said, her voice shaky. Mark and I exchanged worried looks. What's going on? I asked, my stomach tightening. Jack took a deep breath. The house, it's mortgaged. Heavily mortgaged. We owe $200,000, and the bank could take it away if we don't settle the debt in 2 months. My fork clattered onto my plate. What do you mean? All the repairs we just paid for? Mary started sobbing. We were ashamed and thought we could manage it. But after the repairs and everything else, there's just no way. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. All the money, all the effort for a house that wasn't even secure. So, what are you saying now? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Well, Mark started, avoiding my eyes. I was hoping maybe, Melina, you could talk to your father. Are you serious? I snapped, voice rising. Ask my dad for $200,000? It's just for his help. The house would be secure for our future, Mark pleaded. Mary's sobbing grew louder, making me feel like the villain in this twisted drama. Please, Melina. It's our home. We've spent decades in this house. I was furious, but the tears and pleading wore me down. I'll think about it, I muttered, feeling completely trapped. The next day, I called my dad hesitantly, explaining the situation. To my surprise, he agreed to help, but on one condition. I'll give them money, Melina, he said firmly, but only with a formal agreement. A receipt. I want everything documented. When I relayed my dad's condition to Mark, he wasn't happy. Why does it have to be so formal? He snapped, his frustration bubbling over. Can't he just trust us? Mark, it's $200,000, I argued, feeling the growing divide between us. He's just being cautious. He'll get his paperwork, Mark muttered, clearly annoyed. The paperwork was drawn up, the money transferred. Mary and Jack were relieved, constantly thanking me with tearful smiles, but the atmosphere between Mark and me had changed. There was a coldness now, a distance that hadn't been there before. Just when I thought life couldn't get any darker, tragedy struck with brutal suddenness. Melina, it's your Aunt Judith. Her voice shaky and choked with emotion came through the line. Your dad, he had a heart attack. It's bad. My heart dropped into my stomach. How is he? I whispered, barely able to breathe. He didn't make it, honey.
I'm so sorry.
The phone nearly slipped from my numb fingers. No, that can't be right, I mumbled, feeling hollow. I hung up and turned, only to find Mark standing in the doorway. What's wrong? His voice was low. My daddy's gone. I managed before everything inside me broke, and I started sobbing. Mark came over and put his arm around me, but it felt like a stranger's embrace. I'm sorry, Melina, he said, and it sounded sincere, but I was too lost in grief to really hear him. Exhausted from a long day of funeral planning and dealing with the agency, I came home earlier than usual. I expected the house to be quiet. Instead, as I inserted my key into the front door, I heard voices in the living room. It was Mark, his tone dripping with frustration and disgust as he spoke to his parents. I can't do this anymore. Living with her is driving me nuts. She's just, it's too much. His mom, usually sweet and understanding, replied in a stern whisper. You have to hold on a bit longer, Mark. We need to figure out what to do with those receipts your father-in-law had. Melina has them now. The sooner I get out, the better, Mark said coldly. I'll grab those receipts, destroy them, and then I'll start all over again with that rich beauty I told you about. A chill ran down my spine. Here I was, mourning my father, while the people I lived with were plotting behind my back. They weren't the loving family I thought I married into. They saw me as nothing more than a means to an end, a way to secure their financial troubles. Rage mixed with shock, but I knew I had to keep my cool. I slammed the door loudly, stepping inside as if I'd just caught them red-handed. Oh, Melina, you're back early. Mary's voice shifted instantly to one of concern, her eyes wide with fake innocence. How did everything go with the funeral plans? I forced a smile, my stomach twisting. It's all coming together. Thanks for asking. As I spoke, I saw the quick glance they shot each other, faces masking their true colors. It made my skin crawl, but I realized then that showing my cards now wouldn't help. I needed to be smart, to protect what was mine, and maybe even get some justice for their deceit. The funeral was somber, heavy with grief and murmured condolences. But as the ceremony ended and we gathered at Mark's parents' house, the true colors of the family I married into began to show. We sat in the living room, sipping lukewarm coffee, when Mark's demeanor shifted. His charming facade crumbled away, revealing a colder side. With a cruel laugh, he looked straight at me and dropped the bombshell. Melina, pack your things. You need to get out. I've got someone else now. Someone better. His words hit me like a slap. I pretended to be stunned, but before I could respond, Mary chimed in with a snide giggle. We've really had enough of you, dear. We only put up with you for your money. What about the house? I asked, fighting to sound innocent. The house that I paid to fix. The $200,000 I poured into it. Mary laughed harder, as if I'd just told the best joke of the year. Oh, sweetie, this house is ours. You're nothing here. Mark's smirk widened. And those receipts you're so proud of? Found them in your dad's house and burned them. They're gone. For a moment, I let them believe they'd won. Then, I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter. My reaction confused them. Their smiles faltered. Why are you laughing? What's so funny? Mark demanded. I wiped a tear from my eye, still chuckling. You three are just pathetic. You think you're so clever. The receipts you destroyed? They were copies. The real ones are safe with my lawyer. The color drained from their faces. Mark's arrogance turned to panic. You can't prove anything, he stammered. I can. And I will. I shot back, voice steady and firm. Now, I want my money back. All of it. Or my next call is to the police. Mark and Jack looked at each other, their earlier confidence replaced by fear. Jack, usually bold and brash, began to plead. Melina, please.
Let's talk about this.
We can sort something out. With the truth out in the open and the leverage squarely in my hands, the negotiations dragged on longer than I expected. It was clear they were trying every angle to sway the terms in their favor. But I wasn't about to budge. Look, it's simple, I stated firmly during one of our many discussions at their now legally mine kitchen table. The house gets transferred to my name in exchange for the IOUs. That's the deal. No more games. Finally, they relented. We all agreed the best course of action was to make everything official and legal. I insisted that everything be documented by a lawyer, confirmed with proper papers. No corners cut, I told them, voice cold and unyielding. At the lawyer's office, the atmosphere was thick with tension as the documents were signed and notarized. I watched every move carefully, making sure each signature was applied with no room left for future deceit. Once everything was finalized, I gathered the papers related to the house transfer and turned to Mark's mother. She looked deflated, yet there was still a faint trace of her old hostess charm, a reminder of better days she clung to. I'll be keeping these in a safe place, I said, holding up the folder before slipping the documents inside, just to make sure no one got any foolish ideas about pulling stunts. With the legalities taken care of, the divorce proceedings moved swiftly. Mark was unusually quiet, his earlier arrogance nowhere to be seen. When the final papers were signed, a weight lifted from my shoulders, a chapter closed, finally. The day they moved out, I stood on the porch of my fully owned house, watching Mark and his parents carry their belongings to a rented van. Their movements were slow, their mood somber, a sharp contrast to the smugness they once wore like armor. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't how I imagined my marriage would end, but given everything, it was the best outcome I could have hoped for. As things settled, and I started to enjoy my newfound peace, news reached me through friends about Mark's predicament. Apparently, the grass wasn't greener on the other side. His mistress had dumped him not long after our divorce. His parents were now crammed into a tiny apartment, a harsh downgrade from the comfortable home they once flaunted. It seemed karma had caught up with them faster than I expected. Despite their situation, they began reaching out to me. Calls and messages flooded my phone, likely attempts to worm their way back into my life, or at least into my house. But I was done with their lies and manipulation. I blocked their numbers without hesitation and blacklisted them on every social platform. Cutting those final threads felt incredibly liberating. One afternoon, as I relaxed with a book in my living room, there was a knock at the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw Mark standing there, a pitiful figure clutching a wilted bouquet of flowers. The audacity of it made me scoff. I opened the door, unable to hold back my laughter at the sight of him. Really, Mark? Flowers? He shifted uncomfortably, the bouquet seeming to droop along with his spirit. Melina, I've realized so many things. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. I cut him off, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk, not bothering to hide my amusement. What changed, Mark? He ran out of excuses, eyes downcast, shame clear in every line of his face. I made mistakes, but I'm here to make things right. I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for him. Almost. You're not here to make things right, Mark. You're just desperate to get back to your comfortable life. But guess what? That life doesn't exist anymore, not for you. His face fell. He took a step back, as if my words hit him like physical blows. Melina, please save it. I cut him off sharply, my voice cold and final. I want you to leave. Don't come back here. We're done. Forever. Mark stood there a moment longer, his hope visibly crumbling. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, shoulders hunched in defeat. Returning to my book, I smiled quietly to myself. The stillness of the house wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, a stark contrast to the chaos that once ruled here. I was finally at peace, living life on my own terms. No wilted bouquet, no empty promises, no manipulations could ever take that away from me. I was truly, finally free. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.